Live from New York City, it's the Gary Null Show. And now, your host, Gary Null.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gary Null, broadcasting live from our studios in New York City. Video streaming, but the video streaming will be posted in 1 hour on Gary Null Facebook, so you'll have a chance to see the different video clips and that I'm doing and sharing with you. The latest on health and healing, plus we're going to take your calls, and we're also going to do an original, in-depth investigative report, and we're going to take a look at science, because we've been told that science is the final arbiter of all truths. All right? What if, however, as in the case of vaccines, in the case of synthetic hormone replacement therapy and Vioxx and so many drugs that we have used or are using now, what if the science doesn't support the use at the medical level? What if science itself is engaged in fraudulent activities? What if even without fraud, most scientists cannot duplicate their own published work in peer-reviewed journals? It simply is not scientific. What if they cheat? What if they're more interested in aligning their conclusions with what drug companies can use in order to sell a product? That is what we're going to be discussing, and we're tying it into Wikipedia in our series Challenging Wikipedia's Legitimacy. And also, as you'll see coming up later this week, we have a big challenge for Wikipedia and its skeptics. Also, I want to thank the full house, standing room only, yesterday at the New School. I appreciate all of you who came from many different locations, some from upstate New York, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, and New York. And even though it went for over 3 hours, it still was not enough time. So I am going to be posting this week. One of the most important discussions was, how long can we expect reasonably to live? And I'll give you the actual calculations for that, so you'll be able to make some notes for yourself, because no two people are the same. They don't have the same lifestyle and background. But it won't take long to look at your life, pros and cons of what you've done, and then give yourself a score. And it's approximation, but at least it'll give you an idea of why the average American's living about 78.1 years if you're a man and 80 years if you're a woman, when we should be living in ideal health to about 100 and, I would say 105 in ideal health. And some people who've been healthy their whole life should be living to about 120. It's entirely possible. So that'll be coming later this week. So we begin. First up, we're going to talk about cranberries. Why? Because a new study shows that cranberries improve our health. Yes. A study concludes from Poznań University in Poland, cranberries are most often consumed during Thanksgiving, and unfortunately people are not consuming it more often than they should be. However, should you enjoy cranberries, they're a little bitter, and unfortunately people then start adding the sugar to it, and you shouldn't. You should try to have the cranberries as a juice, unsweetened, or you can have the cranberries as let's say a concentrate. And that's probably the best way of getting it, where they wick off a lot of the water. And so therefore you're getting more cranberries and more the important phenols that are in there. And so they say that it'll help your oral health. A new study reports that cranberries can help fight inflammation due to gingivitis. The study was published in the journal Nutrition Research and suggests that cranberries consumed as a functional drink, functional meaning it actually does something, can be a natural part of gingivitis. So that's good. Blueberries also could prevent tooth decay. Higher consumption of sugary beverages is linked with increased risk of death. This is from Harvard School of Public Health. And the more sugar-sweetened beverages that people consumed, the greater the risk of premature death, particularly death from cardiovascular disease, and to a lesser extent from cancer. This is according to a large, long-term study of U.S. men and women. The risk of death linked with drinking the sweetened beverages was more pronounced among women. The study led by Harvard's Chan School of Public Health also found that drinking one artificially sweetened beverage per day instead of a sugary one lowered the risk of premature death. But that's merely one substitute. I would not suggest you have any artificially sweetened beverages at all. So remember, you drink just 4 sweetened beverages a day, you increase your risk substantially of dying of heart disease in women. A lot of people simply don't like to exercise. It doesn't matter what you like or don't like. If you exercised, even light physical exercise is linked with a lower risk of heart disease, especially as you age as a woman. From the University of California at San Diego, as well as the National Institute of Health, so light physical activity, such as strolling, walking fast, even gardening, might be enough to significantly lower the risk of cardiovascular disease among women 63 and older. This kind of activity, researchers said, appears to reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease events such as stroke or heart failure by 22%, and the risk of heart attacks or coronary death by as much as 42%. Now, mind you, this is rather unique because that's the minimum, and you still get that maximum. Could you imagine if you went for an hour power walk every day, if you did resistance exercises with light weights? The results of the study, which were funded by the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, are part of the National Institute of Health article appeared in the Journal of the American Medical Association's Network Open. There is an important flavonoid. It's called naringin, Narigin, and it helps, as a flavonoid, it helps metabolic syndrome. This is from the University of Kembatsin in Malaysia. So according to the new report originating from the Kuala Lumpur, research states that metabolic syndrome, which consists, of course, as we know, you've heard me mention many times, hypertension, hyperlipidemia, hyperglycemia, and visceral obesity, where you see your belly and it's overweight, and especially if you have a belly where you look down and you really see a belly protruding, that's really dangerous. Studies have shown that plant-derived flavonoids have the ability to alleviate metabolic syndrome, and that's important. So the more fruits, especially berries, that you're eating, the more of these you're getting into your body, and the greater the benefit if you have pre-diabetic or diabetic conditions. Also, many people are using heart drugs, and I never tell a person to take or not take a particular drug. That's between you and your physician. What I will tell you is that a commonly used heart drug associated with increased risk of sudden cardiac arrest. Now remember, this is a drug for your heart, and it's increasing your risk of dying of a sudden heart attack. And this is in the European Journal of the Society of Cardiology. And this is a drug that's commonly used to treat high blood pressure and angina, which is chest pain, and is associated with an increased risk of out-of-hospital sudden cardiac arrest. That's not good. And a sudden cardiac arrest causes around half of all cardiac deaths in people. So the heart stops pumping after cardiac arrhythmia, and this is lethal in minutes if untreated. So for those of you who are taking these, remember they can cause arrhythmias. And there are other ways of approaching this, and why don't you speak with a holistic cardiologist? There are many. The Brazilian pepper tree, that's pepper, P-E-P-P-E-R-T-R-E-E, pepper tree, one word, is found to disarm the deadly MRSA bacteria. This is from Emory University. Now, we call MRSA methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, and it's one of the major superbug threats our world is facing today. It's commonly found in hospitals or nursing homes. MRSA is resistant to many of the last resort antibiotics, though I should tell you that it can be treated. I've seen people who've had MRSA, and with ozone, intravenous ozone, around the tissue, and also using colloidal silver and gold colloidal, as well as Manuka honey, it has made a big difference. But that's not used in hospitals. If you don't treat MRSA quickly, the infection is generally fatal. In fact, 80,000 aggressive MRSA infections that occur every year in the United States, 11,000 patients do not survive the infection. That's according to the latest numbers out of the official government statistics. So American researchers from Emory University may have discovered a new weapon to fight this deadly disease. It's inspired by healers in the Amazon rainforest who have been using Brazilian pepper tree berries to treat wounds and infections for ages. They found that pepper tree extracts may prove to be very useful in the treatment of lethal MRSA infections. So again, something natural that the government has found works, and that's important. A new study supports the link between the omega supplementations, that's the omega-3s, and the reduction in depression, the University of Amsterdam. So according to the World Health Organization, depression is a major cause of disease worldwide. More than 350 million people suffer from chronic depression. And according to the National Institutes of Mental Health, an estimated 15.7 million adults in the United States have major depression every year. So a new meta-analysis published in Translational Psychiatry supports the link between taking your essential fatty acids, especially DHA, that's D as in David, H as in hello, A as in apple, the omega-3 fatty acids, the kind you find in walnuts, avocados, or fish. And the meta-analysis looked at 13 studies with over 1,233 participants, and those that used the EPA or DHA, the fatty acids, reported substantial antidepressant effects. Also from Aarhus University in Denmark, common painkillers are more dangerous than we think. Many Danes are prescribed the non-steroidal anti-inflammatories for the treatment of painful conditions and fever and inflammation and arthritis. But the treatment also comes with side effects, including risks of ulcers and increasing your blood pressure. And a major new study now gathers all research into the areas, and this shows that arthritis medicine is particularly dangerous for heart patients, and also the older types of arthritis medicine which have not previously been tested are also dangerous for your heart. Well, we know they're dangerous because Vioxx killed 60,000 Americans, and that was a COX-2 inhibitor, and that was a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory. And here's what happens. And this is, oh, by the way, they're also casting doubt about how beneficial aspirin should be for older people. I'll give you a conversation I had with my cardiologist, because every year I have two major cardiovascular stress tests. I have my blood workups done. I want to make sure that I'm aging correctly. And after all the tests were taken, I gave him a series of studies on why aspirins were not the right thing to thin people's blood. That you could thin the blood safely by using vitamin C, vitamin E, also other nutrients that were the omega-3 fatty acids, green juices, and that these actually benefited the body, whereas an aspirin will cause bleeding. Over 24,000 people average per year in the United States die from taking the aspirin. Also, the aspirin destroys folic acid, B12, vitamin C, and B6, the very nutrients you need to prevent an elevation in your homocysteine level. So, on the one hand, you could legitimately say that by taking aspirin, you're thinning the blood, helping to lessen the likelihood of stroke. They are correct. But then you're dying at a much greater level because you have an elevated homocysteine level, and homocysteine kills more people when it's elevated, especially around 15, 16, 17, 18, etc. And you need these nutrients to keep it low. If you took trimethylglycine, vitamin B6, B12, folic acid, vitamin C each day, more often than not you're going to have a lowered homocysteine level. So you reduce the incidence of stroke and you increase the risk of heart attacks. That's how monotheistic and foolish much of the modern-day medicine is. Vitamin D may also help avert early onset of insulin resistance. This is from Ben-Gurion University in Israel. So early intervention with vitamin D in deficient individuals can help ward off early onset of insulin resistance. And this was published in the peer-reviewed journal Diabetes, Obesity, and Metabolism. So they were taking in the treatment up to 100,000 units bimonthly or placebo. And the research found after adjusting for baseline levels in age and body mass and sun exposure and body activity and cholesterol, that there was significant differences in insulin and homeostasis if you took vitamin D. That's all good. Now we're going to take a break and come right back with your questions, and we'll take just a few. Please stay with us.
Hi, Gary. This is a question about the gluten issue. If a person is going to eat bread and they don't have an issue with gluten sensitivity, should they eat regular bread or seek out gluten-free products?
I would parse that and add something to it. There's new research showing that some people are not allergic to the gluten as much as they're impacted by the glyphosate, the synthetic pesticide that's sprayed on crops. And that's bad. So if you are tested, you should test yourself for environmental toxins, because some people have a lot of exposure to these. In fact, there's new studies showing that Parkinson's disease actually starts in the gut, and it's triggered in some cases by a heavy influence of pesticides, including the kind like Roundup that we use in our backyards that we shouldn't be using. So that's one. Separately, I'll give you myself as an example. When I eat regular gluten in any form, let's say a piece of bread, I know that I'll get a little redness in the earlobes and a little congestion in the nose. So I haven't had gluten in decades. But when I was in Italy, and I was in the countryside, and I was watching people actually harvest the grains and then put them into a stone grinding mill, and just with their this way they had it set up, they had two stones, a larger one on the bottom, a smaller one on top, a hole in the middle. They pour the whole grains in, and then they turned it, and as they turned this, it would crunch up the whole grain. And that's what they used to make pasta. And then they made the homemade pasta and put it on some what would look like how people used to have a clothesline and put their laundry over a clothesline to dry out in the sun, which always gives you the best drying and has the greatest smell to it. In any case, they had all this pasta. I thought, what the heck? I can overcome the effects, and I can take some extra quercetin and, damp down in a couple minutes any side effects I might have. I had no effects. In fact, my entire time, that trip, the 2 weeks I spent in Italy, I had no adverse effects of eating in any restaurant. I couldn't find a bad restaurant in Italy or France. And I came back home. So I tried some back here. Symptoms came back. Then I had to ask myself, these ones I tried had all been organically grown and stone ground. It had a different grit to it, a different mouthfeel. Like if you've ever consumed olive oil right from the olive orchards, you'll know that it's darker. It has a stronger, richer taste. Most Americans like oils light, and therefore they're They're frequently clarified. They're filtered to give a light color to oils. No, you see how they actually are stored there. Very deep. It looks almost like car oil that you put in your engine. And so I thought, wow, all right, that's probably something there where I'm allergic to the way it's grown. Now, I'll jump over to another topic. We were doing organic gardening as an experiment upstate in Goshen that has the richest topsoil in America. It's called black dirt. And it's only one area that I'm aware of. It's probably in other areas. I just am not aware of the other areas. But the whole Goshen area has this soil. When you walk on it, it's so light that you actually move. You know, it's much like walking on one of those moving escalator in airports. And you could take your hand right down to your elbow in the soil. And whatever you plant there, it grows. Everything we planted grew. In fact, many people from this audience, I'll bet some of you remember going from the Fertile Earth Farm up in Stone Ridge. It was the first organic teaching farm in New York history. We started the first food co-op, the High Falls Food Co-op. It exceeded by 3 months the Berkeley Food Co-op, so it could be argued that it was the first food co-op of that era in America. Thousands of people visited. Some weekends I'd have as much as 500 people come up on a Saturday and Sunday just to learn. And I would always give people big black garbage bags, huge ones, not the little ones, but giant ones, like 30 gallons. And we would stop off on the way back in Goshen at the farm, and people were allowed to walk through the fields and pick as much as they could put into a garbage bag, which was a lot, and take it home free as a gift to me. And we had people from different soup kitchens and churches who would come and take extra bags for their congregation, which I was happy to share with them. And in fact, if you up on my website under photographs, the Fertile Earth Farm, you'll see people in the fields, the big fields. I think I'm holding a big gourd that grew. Everything grew, and it was very nutrient rich. Right beside that farm was an orchard. And the orchard was kind of cool because it was up on a hill. Not a tall hill, maybe 70 feet. And so we tried doing apple cider there, too. I built a press. You'll see pictures of that, me with my bib overalls on, and that is a apple cider press. We constructed that and made apple cider. In any case, when you're around all these apples, and I knew they weren't sprayed because they were discolored, meaning they hadn't been sprayed. They still had the worm scab on it, where the worm ate itself out and a scab formed after it, which wouldn't be sold in the market. Wouldn't be aesthetically pleasing. That was completely nutritious, but I'd eat 2 or 3 of these apples. Again, I was allergic. I had no symptoms. The next day when I went back in Manhattan, ate an apple, had symptoms. So it wasn't the apple I was allergic to. It was what was sprayed on the apple. So we have to ask ourselves, have we tested organic against non-organic in the Cocoa Pulse test, where in the morning, before you get out of bed, you take your pulse for 60 seconds. You write it down. Let's say it's 70 beats per minute. Then you take a single item. Let's say you're testing an organic apple. You take an organic apple and you take a bite out of it. You still stay in bed. You don't move around. And 20 minutes later, you take your pulse again. Now, it should still be 70 beats per minute. If it is, good, then you're not allergic to that apple. But let's say it goes up 5 beats per minute. The next day you do it again. If it still goes up 5 beats per minute, there's a high probability you're allergic to something about that apple. Now try an organic apple first, then try a regular apple, commercial apple, and see if there's a difference. It's a little time consuming, but in a month or two you can literally do your own allergy testing using the Cocoa Pulse test and for free. And then if you want to have it confirmed by one of the environmental experts, fine. So it is not always the gluten. Now, if I was going to eat bread, I would eat a bread that is nutritious, meaning it actually has nutrients. I don't know of any of the commercial breads that provide that, because the commercial breads have stripped off almost everything that's beneficial. You're getting a refined carbohydrate with sugar and chemicals that your body does not like, and therefore you're just gaining weight. In fact, one single slice of bread a day, if everything else is perfect in your diet, you don't increase your caloric content at all, at the end of a year, you've gained about 10 pounds from one extra slice of bread a day. So what would I do? I would use the Essene, E-S-S-E-N-E, Essene bread. Ezekiel Essene bread is good, but there are other, and it's a flourless bread. It's made from sprouts. Therefore, there's no gluten in it because the sprout is gluten-free. That's why wheatgrass is gluten-free. So when people say, well, I can't have wheatgrass because it's got wheat, no, that is the little seedling, and that's the most nutritious thing you could take is some wheatgrass juice and give your cat and dog some wheatgrass to chew on. It's great for them. And so the Essene breads, and they come in all kinds of varieties, and plus they have what is called manna bread, and it's a sprouted bread. And it can be savory with garlic and onions and chives and different herbs, or it can be like almonds and raisins. So you have two different types, and it's made without high heat, and so those would be the breads I would try. That's all the time. I'm looking at the clock, and I want to get to some other things, but again, you can go to our website at prn.fm, and you can see a number, and that number you can call in and give your comments. So we'll take more calls tomorrow. Again, I never know how long my answer is going to be. It depends on what the question is to make sure that you have it. So we're going to take a real quick break, and we're going to come back, and then I'm going to share some information because all the 7 million parents in America whose children have been vaccine damaged, well, there's been a witch hunt against them. And Vera Sharav from the Alliance for Human Research Protection has written an article to defend these people, and I want to share some insights from that and my own as well. So we'll be right back, and we'll give you that insight because all of us who are concerned about the safety and efficacy of vaccines, and all of us who believe that our number one priority is keeping our children safe, have trusted the government. We've trusted the CDC, the FDA, the National Institutes of Health, and that's a mistake, as you will see. Please stay with us. I'd like to welcome you from all over the world. I'm Gary Null. We're broadcasting all over the world in syndicated stations, and our sister station where I've been for 43 years on WBAI in New York. And it's been a journey, and we continue it because it needs to have some radicalized voices. It needs to be controversial. It needs to take on the topics and come out to share those points of view to protect the larger population. And I'm sure you're aware that the mainstream media is already aligned and unfortunately substantially compromised by the people that pay their bills, Big Pharma. We're all aware of the measles outbreak. Now it's a modern-day witch hunt. And it's against the parents of unvaccinated children. And it was unleashed. And it's everywhere. You know what you won't find? You won't find the journalists and the doctors who are on there telling you they've done their homework. And in the last 10 years, there were no deaths from vaccines, but there were from measles, but there were deaths from the measles vaccine, over 200. Why can't they do that research for themselves? Why do they accept everything from the CDC and the FDA as if it's absolute sacred and good information? It's not. We are witness to an orchestrated frenzy that has been revved up by vaccine stakeholders, meaning those who have a direct or indirect financial stake in vaccines through the corporate academic institutions that employ them. And their unified objective is to achieve maximum utilization of vaccines and total compliance with vaccination schedules set up by the government in collaboration with the vaccine manufacturers. And contrary to the barrage of fake news promulgated by government health officials and the media to influence public opinion, the fact is most childhood infectious disease outbreaks include both vaccinated and unvaccinated children. And what's more, when the infection has been tested, vaccine strains have often been identified as the cause of the infection. In 2015, a measles outbreak in California Disneyland garnered nationwide front-page publicity and dire warnings by public health officials and vaccine so-called experts. They generated high public anxiety, and this fear-mongering led to the demonization of unvaccinated children who were perceived as the speakers and spreaders of disease. They spoke about being in defiance of being vaccinated, then they spread the disease. That was not true. Never disclosed to the public, but known to the CDC officials, is the following evidence that has finally been published in the Journal of Clinical Microbiology, a major peer-reviewed journal. Quote, during the measles outbreak in California in 2015, a large number of suspected cases occurred in recent vaccinees. Of the 194 measles virus sequences obtained in the United States in 2015, 73 were identified as vaccine sequences. Okay? That means that those who were vaccinated were spreading the disease. But the public was never shared this data, that the measles outbreak was in part caused by the vaccine. It is evidence of the vaccine's failure to provide immunity. But this crucial information has been concealed and continues to be withheld from the public. After all, how many have read the belated disclosure in the Journal of Microbiology? Quote, current mumps outbreak following vaccination? No. Nearly 200 people in Texas detention facilities have contracted mumps. Since October, 186 children and adults contracted mumps at migrant detention facilities across Texas, according to state health officials. These include immigrants and employees. Right? How many of them had vaccinations? And yet you're not told any of this information. All you're doing is you're scared. That's how they win. And do you know how many vaccines they currently have in development that they expect children to take? And adults then? Mind you, everything is going to this. Mandatory vaccines with no exemptions allowed in all 50 states, and then start mandatory vaccinations for adults. Could you imagine what would happen to our health and our children's and babies' health if we were giving a baby 400 different vaccines? We would have the largest number of dead babies in American history, and not a single politician, not a single employee of the media, not a single one of the people from manufacturing facilities say, oops, we were just too greedy, let's back it off and give them less. No. No apologies will come. No refunds will be given. Nothing will be learned. And that's what we're up to today. And I'm going to, on a new upcoming program at this hour, I'll be doing a discussion of the antibody titers resulting from wild virus infection. The lower the quantity of antibodies resulting in immunity, well, I'll go into this in greater depth because it's a little confusing. So we have a lot of people spreading illnesses that are not vaccinated. That were vaccinated. But this is being withheld from the public because they have they have an agenda. And we're going to challenge them as much as we can. I'm writing articles on this now, as you will see. So we're going to take a break real quick and come back with our in-depth, original investigative report. So please stay with us. This full article is posted on prn.fm. It is fully footnoted. It has been vetted by our scholars in residence and by our team of lawyers. It is entitled, Why You Shouldn't Trust Wikipedia, Propagandists for the Broken Establishment. This article is researched and written by myself and Helen Buyniski. Science, whether in academia or in the mainstream media, television or popular online outlets, is the rarefied domain of the so-called experts. That's what we're told. To prove they are experts, the gatekeepers of the Academy present a pedigree background, bristling with prestigious degrees and honors and awards and publications in the top journals of their field, and other trappings of success. And virtually any important topic involving medicine, healthcare, finance, even behavior is directed and codified by these preeminent spokespersons, marching in ideological lockstep. Every major medical organization, from the American Medical Association to the College of Physicians and Surgeons to the National Academy of Sciences, to the leading academic journals such as the Lancet and the British Medical Journal or Nature, are all staffed by people who rarely, if ever, challenge the consensus. And virtually every one of our government agencies is likewise staffed with consensus scientists. Medical theory and practice are controlled by local and state medical boards that watch carefully to ensure that physicians are practicing science-based medicine with an absolute unwavering belief that this is the only way to practice medicine. Scientific evidence published in peer-reviewed journals, a person lives or dies by doing this. If they don't publish, they're out. If they do publish, they're in. So this is directly associated with reputational association. And it comes from a respected institution. If it doesn't, then it's not true. If it does, then it is true. No questions are asked. And the alternative is also true. If one day a board-certified physician in any specialty realizes that maybe his patients or her patients are not improving or receiving or recovering because there's something wrong with the standard protocols and a hypothesis that the truth lies maybe outside some officially accepted paradigm, the scientific powers that be shake their heads and say, what a foolish thought. That's just quackery. There are millions of scientists working every day in private labs, government agencies, universities, and corporate research centers, dedicated to not just finding the truth, but to repeating it ad nauseum, obsessively polishing it, buffing the uncertainty out. Surely they can't all be wrong. These overseers view any part of medicine outside of the generally accepted paradigm as, in the frequently cited words of Wikipedia co-founder Jimmy Wales, the work of lunatic charlatans. Let me repeat that. Here is a person that has no background in science, no background in clinical experience, no board certifications, has not published in the scientific literature, has not presented his views based upon good science to scientific institutions, but is willing to call all of the holistic doctors, all the holistic nurses, all the holistic dentists, all the people practicing body-mind activities, including meditation, homeopathy, naturopathy, let's say traditional Chinese medicine. All these people, you're talking about several 100,000 clinicians, tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of their patients, and all the articles they published in peer-reviewed literature, and all the citations that support this work is good. All those people are now lunatic charlatans. Wow. And the media hasn't said, what do you mean? You have no background. You have no qualities of insight to make these judgments. But unfortunately, supporting Wells are a limited number of self-styled skeptics. These skeptics believe in an even more radical and ultra-orthodox form of science-based medicine than the rest of the medical establishment, many of whom have, after years of actual clinical practice dealing with the realities of patients and disease, begun to grudgingly admit there might be something to these complementary and alternative modalities that they have value. After all, they've existed for thousands of years. Billions of people collectively have used them, and there's hundreds of thousands of scientific articles supporting these therapies. These skeptics, however, don't believe any of that. They're free of intrusion from clinical reality, and they're ultimately keepers of the scientific gates, and they are the ones who attack anyone as if you're a heretic. They don't look at how many people you've treated and cured or improved. They look at the mere fact that you are delusional enough to believe that your therapy may help someone. Have they interviewed the doctors? No. The patients? No. Have they been in their office to see how they're doing this? No, and they won't be. Hence, despite the trillions of dollars flowing into the medical industrial complex, we have no cures for major diseases such as Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS, depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, chronic heart failure, cancer, diverticulitis, arthritis. We do have treatments for everything. Indeed, our life today has been pathologized so heavily that the normal behaviors of people going through life issues, behaviors like grieving and stress, are now pathologized. Millions of children every day are forced to take medications, none of which have cured anybody ever, but all of which are to be dutifully taken in order to maintain symptoms, creating lifeline customers for the pharmaceutical industry. There's a growing discontent among millions of parents who have obediently followed the instructions of their physicians, given their children vaccines, assuming they are safe and effective, only to watch their child have an adverse reaction to a vaccine. Anything from delayed learning to autism to death. At least half the people dying of cancer are dying from the treatments from chemotherapy and radiation. People are prescribed antipsychotic medications for all-label uses, then become psychotic and commit horrible acts of violence, including killing themselves. Do you know that the number one cause of death in 10 to 14-year-old boys is suicide? When I was growing up, no boy committed suicide. Or girl. The majority of mass shootings are committed by individuals taking psychiatric medication, but that is never discussed. Veterans, active and retired, many of them on the same drugs, are committing suicide at a rate of minimally 20 per day, putting a gun in their mouths and simply blowing a hole through their head. Almost 60,000 people died after taking the painkiller Vioxx, more than all American casualties in the Vietnam War. Yet medicine chose not to change its ways, no matter how horrific the casualties of the dominant paradigm. Merck, the drug's manufacturer, merely paid a fine and moved on to the next fraud. As with any pharmaceutical company, the deaths of patients are merely the cost of doing business, collateral damage in the pursuit of the almighty bottom line. Medicine doesn't change. Medicine doesn't apologize. Doctors don't give money back. When was the last time that an oncologist went to a grieving family and said, "We realize that every single thing you were told to do, you did, but in spite of all that, you died. So, we're sorry, we're going to give back, the money. It was a worthless treatment." Never happens. No. And no one is held accountable either. Not the physician, not the nurse, not the pharmacist, not the hospital, nor the corporations profiting from all this. In effect, the entire medical industrial complex has been indemnified. It's a little wonder that some individuals have finally said enough. Parents are fighting back, but only after they are victimized. They begin to study and read the literature to uncover the discrepancies between the CDC's lies and actual scientific facts. The contradictions and counter-indications are there. They just never knew it. They get angry. Instead of addressing 7 million parents' grievances, the CDC, the FDA, and the entirety of the American media, unfortunately, are all part of the medical industrial complex. And the media simply is the power to convince parents that even though 7 million of you say your children were injured, you're just all delusional. You're probably now going to do something really irrational and stupid, like reading the scientific literature, something we journalists haven't done and our doctors haven't done, and showing that an educated consumer is a danger. So we'll just say now that you're just delusional and we can't trust you. But hold on, we're supposed to trust people. Well, we're supposed to, but we don't trust any vaccine-damaged parent. Or if your kid took an antidepressive drug and committed suicide, we don't trust that the drug had anything to do with it. Or that over 160,000 GIs have killed themselves since 1991 taking these antipsychotic medications, but it certainly never was a case where any single person ever took their life because of a drug they were on. So you see, medicine is blameless for everything. Your doctor is blameless. The nurses are blameless. The pharmacists are blameless. The politicians that take the money, all of them from the major pharmaceutical industry, they're blameless. The media that give us all these ads convincing us we should take something that will unstop our nose, but death is a side effect, they're blameless. So nobody is to blame in America today. Isn't that wonderful? Those who have dealt with injury or loss of a child face the additional hardship of being attacked for trying to become informed and educated. Think of how Orwellian this is. The moment you become fully aware, informed, and educate on the particular subject, one of deep personal importance to you, you're the enemy. Yeah. Who better to vilify you than those self-appointed ultra-Orthodox skeptics and Jimmy Wales personally of Wikipedia? Remember what Jimmy thinks of you. Let's take a moment to bring some sanity to this discussion. If science is all we are told it is, if it is absolutely the truth, if every miracle drug is truly a miracle, if the cure for cancer will arise from our next tax-deductible check to the American Cancer Society, we should be able to prove that. They have no proof. We've taken the time to review all of the science in the science-based medicine to see if there are any cracks in the facade of this indomitable paradigm of healing and virtue and authority. And we are absolutely overwhelmed at how the American public has been lied to and manipulated according to the Orthodox Science's own record. Not mine, theirs. We've examined lawsuits, settlements, investigations into the accuracy and legitimacy of the entire medical industrial complex. We're not aware of anyone else who's done this. The results, fully footnoted and sourced, are shocking. Today's science is rife with fraud. Why isn't Wikipedia challenging it? A scientific experiment status rests on whether it can be replicated. By those standards, oncology is very, very sick. A large-scale 6-year undertaking by Dr. Tim Arrington and the University of Virginia's Center for Open Science was unable to replicate any of the findings from 3 out of 5 seminal cancer studies. 2 were inconclusive, while a third wasn't even in the ballpark. Quote, "It's worrying because replication is supposed to be a hallmark of scientific integrity," end quote, according to Dr. Arrington. Well, given the toxicity of popular cancer treatments, these results are doubly disturbing. If the trials demonstrating chemotherapy's effectiveness cannot be reproduced, the validity of the therapies must be reconsidered. Who on earth would undergo the pain and suffering of chemotherapy if they did not believe there was remission at the end of the rainbow? But a 2012 study, Examination of Cancer Studies, published in Nature, found the circumstances even dire, with only 10% of studies holding up to attempts at reproduction. The authors found the low success rate neither sustainable nor acceptable and urged researchers to do better. The Nature study cited a German study conducted by the pharmaceutical conglomerate Bayer, no less, that found only 25% of preclinical cancer trials were reproducible, and noted that despite this fact, some of the drugs tested had moved on to clinical trials, meaning patients were being subjected to experimental regimes that had never shown to be effective. The researchers pleaded for their fellow scientists to focus less on flashy results based upon flawed preclinical and animal models. Quote, "Poorly characterized tumor cell lines that inadequately recapitulate human disease, end quote. And other corner-cutting and time-saving measures like artificial endpoints and criticize journal editors and grant review committees for looking for the so-called perfect story. And because researchers depend upon publication in order to obtain funding and jobs and promotions and tenure, the incentive to lie, to fudge results is enormous. Editors then, quote, must allow for the presentation of imperfect stories and recognize and reward productive results so that scientists feel less pressure to tell an impossibly perfect story to advance their careers, end quote. So, once one researcher gets on the front page of Nature with a fudge story, the goalposts have been moved, and all others, even the most honest and scientifically rigorous, are now measured by those standards. Beyond those who, quote, want to believe researchers with conflicts of interest testing drugs in which they're financially invested, phony results turn even honest scientists into agents of big pharma. And cancer researchers are no better than the rest of the institutionalized science when it comes to reporting results. A stat investigation in 2015 found that every single trial conducted by Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center was published, quote, late or not at all in violation of the 2007 law mandating the speedy publication of clinical trial results. Of the 39 trials examined, 2 involved an experimental drug that caused serious adverse effects in more than a third of the study participants, with complications including bowel and colon obstructions and even death. And while those results languished in publication limbo, other doctors were no doubt running their own trials without the benefit of knowledge that this drug could kill their patients before the cancer did. And Sloan Kettering is far from an exception. STAT also called out the Hooser Cancer Research Institute, which ended a 2009 study of Avastin in breast cancer patients because of potentially life-threatening adverse effects of the treatment, for its failure to report the negative results of the trial, allowing other doctors to potentially treat patients with the dangerous drug. With more and more attention on the prevalence of fraud in the literature on cancer treatment, we should be at the brink of a major medical paradigm shift. Yet none exist. Yet a glance at Wikipedia suggests there is absolutely nothing wrong with the status quo in oncology. Wikipedia's editors spend the lion's share of their time, quote, debunking quacks in cancer treatments instead of questioning the prevailing wisdom on chemotherapy, radiation, and the rest of the slash and burn protocols that are at least as likely to kill patients than cure them. And oncology is just the tip of the iceberg, and it's a rotten, fraudulent iceberg. A 2016 study published in Nature found, quote, 70% of researchers had tried and failed to reproduce experiments conducted by another scientist. Worse, half could not even reproduce their own experiments. The study results were no fluke. 1,576 researchers were queried about their experiences, but the cognitive dissonance revealed that their answers to the study questionnaire was illuminating. More than half, 52%, agreed there was a crisis of reproducibility, but most still trusted the published literature over their own experiences, and less than a third, 31%, believed failure to reproduce published results meant a study was wrong. Well, if you can't reproduce the results, what good is the study? Some researchers blame the culture of scientific research for driving scientists to publish flashy results without attempting to verify them with follow-up studies. Bristol University biological psychology professor Marcus Munetfo says the emphasis on high-risk, high-return results nearly scared him out of a science position entirely when the results of his experiments didn't square up with those in his textbook, and only later did he realize that the textbook science had been, quote, tidied up to lock more impressive published literature promotes impact over substance. So getting published is more important than if you're publishing something other scientists can benefit from. A study conducted by the American Society of Cell Biology found that at least 2/3 of survey respondents have been unable to reproduce the results that they had published, while even pharmaceutical companies' own researchers admit that less than a quarter of prominent papers are reproducible. According to Nature, one of the publications which has been the loudest to demand scientific reform, quote, there is a very real temptation to ignore a result that does not conform to our preconceptions or to recast it so that it does. So, there's a lot more on this article, and all of its footnotes are there. And the bottom line is this. We say that science is the final arbiter of all that's true. And yet, when a lot of doctors and nurses and dentists see that they're limited in the success of what they're doing, try alternative ways, they're then immediately cast out of the institution. They are attacked personally. Their careers ruined. Why not have open debates? If you believe that someone who's no longer practicing oncology using chemotherapy and maybe using something like intravenous vitamin C and getting good results and has those results, why not there be an open debate so we can hear both sides? But we're not given that. The media has become the judge and jury. Places like Wikipedia that has anonymous people who don't have backgrounds in the field that they're working on, especially in public health and science, nutrition, they're considered the new experts, and that's unfortunate. But this is just one of the reasons we have Paxil and Zoloft and had AZT and others that have some very dangerous side effects. If medicine were really successful after receiving $3.5 trillion a year this year, but it's not. It's successful at making money for everyone in medicine, but not successful in eradicating diseases that they were mandated to do. And for academic institutions, fully 90% were late or not reported in the results. So we have a whole lot of problems in medicine. And it starts at the National Institute of Health itself. Stat found that 38% of the National Institute of Health's own scientists reported results within the legal deadline. And if those who set the rules don't follow them, they can hardly expect anyone else to do the same. We have a completely corrupted, completely compromised National Institute of Health and all the agencies associated with it, the National Cancer Institute, the National Institute of Aging. They are all complicit. They've been captured completely by big pharma and special interest groups. And unfortunately, the people defending this are Wikipedia and its editors. Read the whole article. I only shared half of it with you today. It's on prn.fm. I'm Gary Null. Thank you all for listening and watching. Have a nice day.